Howdy, my name's Florencio Villarreal. I'm the representative for Group 4 for the PSAA 611-700 Public Policy Formation. My team includes Emily Carlisle, David Gifford, Nick Reyes, and myself. And today we'll be discussing local control legislation. So Group 4's prompt was what the frack? And what the frack deals with the issue of local control legislation in the state of Texas, specifically in November of 2014, when citizens of Denton voted to push to ban hydraulics fracking in their area. Their concerns stemmed from shockwaves felt across Texas and experience in earthquakes in the Dallas area. Now, this worried state officials because they worried that if local control legislation was implemented in Denton, then other cities would be doing bans throughout the state as well. Now, to fully appreciate the situation and what this means, we have to look into what is local control legislation. So basically, local control legislation refers to laws or regulations enacted by local government bodies that grant them the authority to make decisions and implement policies within their own jurisdiction. Local governments, such as cities, counties, municipalities, or regional authorities, often have specific needs and circumstances that differ from those at the state or federal level. The mindset of these municipalities are, we live here, we're the ones dealing with these things. We are the experts of everything local, who is the state or the federal to step on us. And that is basically their mindset. So looking into local control legislation continued, there are 4 types of municipalities. The first one is a type A, which consists of a population of 100,000 citizens or more. Type B consists of a population of 65,000, but less than 100,000. Type C, a population of 30,000, but less than 65,000. And home rule. So home rule municipality is interesting because it says that it may do anything authorized by its charter that is not specifically prohibited or preempted by Texas Constitution. The general consensus is that home rule municipalities that fall under state law typically provide the grassroots level service the state is not able to provide. The state legislator is unable to provide services to municipalities at the level required by local citizens, especially in a state as large and diverse as Texas. The mandate then becomes how the state maintains control of local municipalities that exceed laws and statutes established by state legislation. So moving on to the history of local control in relation to the state. We are introduced to Texas House Bill 2127, or also known as the Texas Regulatory Consistency Act. This was passed in the House and Senate and signed by Governor Abbott in an effort to prevent Democratic-run cities and counties from enacting progressive policies, which could drastically limit local government's ability to make rules in areas such as labor rights, drought restrictions, and even noise complaints. The purpose of this act is to provide regulatory consistency across the state and return the historic exclusive regulatory powers of the state where those powers rightfully belong. Moving on to local control in the larger context of state regulation. In examining cases where local control legislation has been implemented, we observe a reoccurring trend predominant in blue states, Democrat, as opposed to red states, Republican. A prime example of local control legislation overriding federal statutes can be observed in the topic of sanctuary cities. So here we have a list of states that are sanctuary states, and the reason why this is important to note is that a lot of sanctuary states became sanctuary states due to a large number of cities within their states started as sanctuary cities. It gained traction. The state ended up adopting it as their own. Predominant example can be seen in California. I want to say a little bit more than half of the cities in California were in favor of sanctuary cities, and eventually became a sanctuary state. But it's important to note that at least 16 counties in Southern California have expressed opposition to the state law by either filing lawsuits or passing local ordinance. So all hope is not lost. The other the other states that engage in this are Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. Moving on to the consequences of sanctuary cities. While many of these sanctuary states, counties, and cities engage in local control legislation from a humanitarian standpoint, they hinder and prohibit the United States government and the Department of Homeland Security from exercising their full capability in securing our borders, protecting American citizens, and combating human trafficking. Another example of local control legislation can be seen in the zero bail policy implemented in Los Angeles, California. The zero bail policy, also known as SB-10 or Proposition 25, is a policy that eliminates bail for certain suspects in the criminal justice system. From my understanding, this was initially made to promote equity, equality. It was meant to help out disenfranchised minorities such as Hispanics and African Americans that make up a majority of criminal cases. It basically lets them off with no bail for small misdemeanors, robberies, things of that nature. Now, looking into the consequences of the zero bail policy, while the intention of the LA local government is to create equality, equity, and promote the rights of their civilian population, this decision increases the risk to public safety and gives criminals the opportunity to reoffend. In addition to increased risk to public safety, this decision increases racial tensions in offenders and the public. Based on a study done by Prison Policy of Black and white criminals that committed the same level of crime and had similar backgrounds in criminal activity, Black defendants were 25% more likely to be held pretrial than white defendants. Ultimately, this would be left up to a judge to decide, who's in, who's out, and the problem with that is the factor of potential bias, potential racism. So moving on to a third example. The third example is gun control in Chicago, Illinois, in the form of gun control. Specifically, Illinois has the 7th strongest gun safety laws in the country and the 9th lowest rate of gun ownership. And that does sound impressive, but looking at the consequences of gun control, we can see while the implementation of gun control on the local and state level produce impressive statistics for low gun ownership, the implementation of gun control reduces the safety of law-abiding citizens who can't protect themselves. It increases gang violence, and it also leads the nation in gun deaths. So moving on to preemption. What is preemption? Preemption occurs when law at a higher level of government is used to overrule authority at a lower level. State law can be used to preempt local ordinances, and federal law can be used to preempt state or local law. Preemption conflicts can emerge between state and local governments due to differences in the partisan makeup of the respective governments. Examples of preemption: sometimes Democratic-led cities are preempted by Republican state governments, such as when the state legislature in Missouri preempted efforts to increase the minimum wage in St. Louis. Democratic state governments have also come into conflict with Republican-led localities such as when several Virginia municipal governments passed firearms resolutions that were preempted by state law. In conclusion, this sums up our presentation on local control legislation. And it's important to note that Group 4 is looking into viable options for the state to consider, such as finding common ground, not a full-blown veto of House Bill 2127, but trying to find common ground where municipalities can voice their opinions through a chain of command. They pass it on to the state passes it to the federal can either grant them temporary authority or not, and we're thinking based on situation. So life-threatening situations, maybe martial law, and or response to disasters. So that is our presentation. Thank you all so much for taking the time, and good luck on the rest of the semester. Gig 'em.